Hi guys! So today you and I are going to talk about being a new developer and not letting things fall to shit. So let's get into it. So the question in question was a little bit of a story. Hi Frederick, a couple of months ago I joined a new company as a mid-level front-end developer and I found myself in a weird situation. There are two senior front-end developers in my team. They apparently worked in the company for over 5 years as their first and only job. Their code quality is trash and their development pace is significantly slower than mine. It was me who introduced a strict type system, unit testing, modular approach, etc. in our repo. They seem to be very positive about everything I propose and they compliment my code quality. I only have 2 years of programming experience and for that reason I'm afraid that one day I will propose some idea that is bad and they will accept it and our project will collapse. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Well, that's the big question, right? How do you know that the decision that you are making right now is not going to make everything fall to shit later? That's that's not knowing the future, right? That's what hindsight is all about. So what I would do in your situation is that I would I would try to understand that you can't really know if your choices are going to turn out all that well because you might need experience that you don't have in order to have that foresight that is necessary, which is that's what experience and good intuition is all about. But what you can do, which is what I like to suggest to people, is that you can spot a big investment and versus a small investment and get good at making your own proof of concepts. So let me walk you through that a little bit. This is sort of my way of thinking about things. So one thing that I argue against is the idea of trying to design something flawlessly because I argue that it cannot be done. Even if you take a lot of time and you invest really heavily, you have the best experts and the most qualitative resources and so forth, and you build the most amazing thing that you can possibly make. It's very unlikely that that thing is going to be as flawless as from all angles that you design whatever it is. And it's very unlikely that it's going to be so well designed that something later on won't come along and sort of make the thing redundant or basically not require a change that might not be possible to make if you made a really heavy investment in a certain thing. To give you an analogy, if you design a single marble statue, that thing is a unit of something. It's very grandiose, it's beautiful, it's amazing in every single way. But the problem is that it's very difficult to change anything about that because any crack in the statue is probably going to start, the whole thing is going to collapse if you try to make any adjustments. But if you designed a statue in Legos, for example, you may not have something as grandiose and it's flawless and as artistically appealing, but it becomes very cheap for you to redo things and build change the statue or modify it in any way you want. And that analogy, like when you're making art, I don't think you should compromise like that. You can make beautiful Lego art, of course, but I hope that we make a difference there. Like that's a different use case from what we software developers have. For us, it's better to build a statue of Legos because if it's easy for you to modify, then it's easy for you to recover, as I like to say, reduce the cost of failure. That's more important than anything else when you're trying to figure out if you're making a good investment or not. Because when you can figure out what a significant investment looks like, so an example, you're a front-end developer. So should you use Redux? Yes or no? It's very difficult for you to answer that question without a lot of experience because it's actually a very big investment. If you use Redux, it's a framework or it's a library that basically it will affect the entire way that you architect your application. Now, I'm assuming you're using React because everybody's using React, but if you're not, you just sort of dismiss this, but it's the same thing when you pick a certain web framework or something like that. It's a very significant investment for you, so you should be a little bit concerned when you make those sorts of investments, because as with the Marvel statue, it's something you literally put, like you create this thing and then it's sort of there, because the cost or like the odds of you changing that is it's going to be very difficult for you to do that. So what I propose to people is to write very disposable code, create smaller proof of concepts of an idea. And instead, as you talked about, modularity is a key thing here. So if you want to come up with an idea or a suggestion for an improvement, you should be able to make a small investment into that thing, sort of like the Legos things. You build some things in Legos, but the cost of failing and the cost of change needs to be fairly low, so that you feel like, yeah, it's not really a big deal if this fails or not, because we can always just go back to the previous thing, or we can always just change our mind like that. And the cost of doing so is basically possible without having to concern ourselves with like big rewrites or anything like that. That's you understanding the heart and soul of what loose coupling is all about. It's the heart and soul of what my saying, which is not loose coupling per se, but disposable code. In other words, shit that you can just throw away if it doesn't work out. And it's the heart and soul of failing often and failing early, in my argument, or like to prioritize iteration speed over the quality of each iteration, because it's fundamentally better for you to be able to iterate on something very quickly and do things multiple times with a very low cost of failure than it is for you to try to design, like each iteration has to be as perfect as possible. I don't know where I heard this from. They don't quote me on this, but so forth. But I recall a story about people designing airplanes way back when, and they were trying to design the first commercial airline plane that was going to travel across the Atlantic or something like that. And the guy who won, or the people who won, basically most in those days, airplanes was of course it still is a very expensive endeavor, right? And the team that won had realized that what they tried to optimize was not to create the perfect airplane. They had optimized for the fastest way to create an airplane and test it. Because when you have a very slow and costly process of creating something and then you're sort of stuck with this, it's difficult for you to experiment, and it's experimentation and proof of concept and these smaller trials and that will give you those insights that you're looking for. It's basically what experience comes from, trying stuff out over and over and over and seeing how it goes. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't go so well, and if that's very costly and scary for you to do, it becomes very difficult for you to feel comfortable in making these bets and these decisions, because the cost is so high. So if you can reduce the cost of experimenting with something so that it doesn't really matter if it goes well or not, that's a very good pattern for you to follow. So what I want you to take away from this is that what I would do in your shoes is that I would continue doing the things that you are doing, because it seems to me that you sort of are bringing something valuable to the team, and then get good at creating your own proof of concept. What I like to do is that I create, I do my own little project. If I have an idea for something weird or quirky and I kind of go, well, I'm not 100% sure how well this is going to turn out, I try to build something small, and I try to figure out in like a proof of concept stage, can this work? And then I present the idea and get some feedback on it, and then I iterate on it, and then I try as much as possible to get a low buy-in threshold, where the cost of trying it out and then finding out that it didn't work so well is not that high. If you look for that approach, that you sort of dip your toe in and then you take it step by step and you grow more and more accustomed to it, it's easier for you to spot oversights or flaws within the things that you are suggesting for your team or for your project and so forth. And that is a very valuable thing that I highly recommend that everybody does, because it's if you can make the cost of failure, which is basically the same thing you should do when you design your system, as low as possible, fear all but vanishes. Because if there's always an undo button that basically doesn't cost anything to hit, then people will feel comfortable trying stuff out, getting new insights, and you will actually get better software quicker than if everything is always this grand design type of thing, where anything any change to your perfect flawless system might actually cause irreparable damage. that's usually a recipe for long-term legacy as opposed to really, really well working software. So in my analogy with the art, try to build Lego statues that you can change whenever you want without any doesn't really matter because it's so easy for you to undo or redo things, as opposed to creating these marble statues. You should only create those if you really do have the grandest idea in the whole wild world. Have a great day.